All right, I got like 5 minutes. Just going to give you a little quick thought. I watched it yesterday. The police officer who sitting in his cruiser talked about how he really felt that, and I'll have staff and stuff post it and figure it out. We'll post in the comments a little bit later. But there's a police officer who basically came out and did a personal video talking about how he was seeing that police officers were enforcing orders, not laws. They were enforcing orders by government officials who were saying you need to arrest a mother who's swinging her child on a swing set. You need to arrest a woman for doing nails out of her home to provide an income for her family, to be able to provide life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Hello. If they are violating the Constitution and officers wish to violate our constitutional rights, then they become an enemy of this nation because the Constitution is the law of the land. I'm sick of this. This police officer is now possibly going to lose his career as a law enforcement officer in Washington State. Because why? Because it is against regulation. It's against their rules to disobey a direct order from the governor or a higher official. Even though his higher official, his superior, said after watching his video where he stood up for the rights of American citizens, he stood up for the Constitution of the United States, a man who served in the military, says stop enforcing orders that go against the Constitution of the United States, which is the law of the land. No law, no order, no executive order, nothing supersedes the Constitution. You become an enemy of me and every other American citizen when you enforce an order that goes against the Constitution. When you arrest a homeless man in Nashville for escaping a forced quarantine. You charge him with a misdemeanor because you're forcing homeless people to stay in a concentration camp? The man's about to lose his career as a law enforcement officer. You don't follow orders, you lose your career as a law enforcement officer. That is nothing more than Nazi Germany Gestapo. Because it is the law of the land, the Constitution, that rules over you as a governor, over you as a law enforcement agent. If you do this, you are basically saying, I am an enemy of the citizens of the United States. I am nothing more than Gestapo. Enough's enough. It's like, do we need to pass laws that if somebody happens to watch their family or friend be thrown to the floor of a Walmart because they're not wearing a mask? Or if we watch the we should be able to physically defend our family members from a police officer if they are trying to arrest them for not wearing a mask. There should be no legal repercussions for physically defending your family members, your friends, even a stranger. You know what Moses did? Moses watched God's people being beaten by the law of the land. It was the law even then. But Moses saw it as wrong. In his spirit, he knew God's spirit that was within him before he even knew the Lord. He said, enough's enough. I'm not going to watch this anymore. I'm watching a slave, one of God's children, be beaten. Injustice taking place. Something that is not right on any level, by any means, for any reason. And it's just the same happening now. A little bit different circumstances, you might say. Oh, we're trying to protect the weak. We're trying to protect the elderly. We're trying to protect the susceptible. But if you're throwing a woman to the floor in a Walmart because she's not wearing a mask, I'm sorry, you're nothing more than a slave driver like the Egyptians were. And if somebody came up and struck you like Moses did, I would see nothing wrong with it. That's me personally. I understand people aren't going to like what I'm saying right now, but I have had it. Everyone should have had it by this point in time. They're physically beating people because they're not listening to orders that are unconstitutional. The American people need to wake up. They need to stand up. They need to fight. I pray to God it doesn't come to physical violence. But that law enforcement officer, you know what he said? By listening to and following through with unjust orders, with tyrannical orders, disobeying the law of the land, violating the law of the land, the Constitution, they are creating a gap. They are creating a divide between law enforcement officers and the citizens of the United States. And by doing so, you are creating enemies. And right now, we have the media talking about wanting to create enemies between those who wear a mask and those who do not. They are violating recommendations by the Lord, I'd say. The Lord says, do not sow discourse among brethren. I'm not a biblical scholar, folks, but that's what they're doing right now. They're asking you to hate, to see your brothers and sisters as the enemy if they don't wear a mask. And I'm sorry, God forbid I watch somebody get thrown to the floor in a Kroger or a Publix or out in public simply because they don't wear a mask. I'm not saying I would have the guts to stand up and do what would be necessary, what I would see as being the same thing as what Moses did. In which saying that is not right. I would speak up, but would I walk in and do anything physical? Part of my spirit would want to. Part of my conscious brain, knowing that tyrannical governments would do nothing more than you struck a police officer. I don't care how much he was beating the woman with the child. Throwing women to the floor with a child in hand. Seeing these videos from these police officers from around the world, it's unacceptable. But this police officer said something that resonated with his other law enforcement officers. I thank God for the fact that it resonated, but I ask and I pray that God, and I pray that you will pray with me right now. Pray that God show and speak to the hearts and minds of our law enforcement agencies, our law enforcement officers, and say, you stand up for the Constitution. You fight for that first. You obey that first. You do not take physical action against a mother, a father, a child just for not obeying orders of the health department. Are you freaking kidding me? The health department has no legal authority, none whatsoever, under our Constitution. But they are sitting here saying right now they can throw a homeless man in jail because he didn't want to stay within the fairgrounds at Nashville, Tennessee. I've had a consult. I'm over a few minutes. I'm sorry. Law enforcement agents, please, for the love of God and love of God's children and the love of a free nation that we were and that we are still today. Because the Constitution is the law of the land. Obey that. Or you become an enemy. And I know people are going to say, well, you're contradicting yourself, Dr. Dale. You're saying that, don't say that those who don't wear a mask and those who wear a mask should become enemies because the media is sowing that discourse amongst brethren. And that's biblical. So don't you do it, Dale. I understand. But I'm not the one making the choice to physically harm somebody because they're not wearing a mask. I don't care if they don't listen to you. I don't care if they resist arrest. If it's not constitutional, then it's not resisting arrest, because you have no legal right to arrest somebody for not breaking a law. If they break an order, that is unacceptable to attempt to arrest them, and you are the one who's violating the law. I'm not a lawyer either, so don't take this as legal advice. Should probably throw that in there. But this is unacceptable. Our nation is in turmoil. This is a spiritual battle taking place right now. We need to hope and pray that our law enforcement agents, they seek the Bible for advice on what they should do in this time. And then they look at our Constitution only second after that, and they say, what should I do right now? That is right. The right thing to do, not the ordered thing to do. But this police officer may lose his career, his job, simply because he exercised his right to a freedom of speech. His constitutional right is being violated right now because he didn't obey an order to take down the video, which spoke to the hearts and spirits of, thank God, those law enforcement officers who are willing to stand up for our Constitution and stand against, and they should stand against tyrannical orders, tyrannical individuals like the governor of California, who's saying that we want to pay, and I'll talk about this here in the near future, maybe even today yet, talking about California governor wanting to pay nursing homes to take on COVID-19 patients, supposedly. What are they trying to infect more people? Are they trying to infect the susceptible? Doesn't make sense. Way too many things right now, if you just look at it, make perfect sense that this is not an attempt to reduce illness, disease, and death. It is an attempt to grab power and money and force the hands of the American people to hand over their rights, their constitutional rights. It is an attempt to make law enforcement agents believe that they now have the right, they have the ability, because they have a badge on their chest, to throw women to the floor because they're not wearing a mask, because they're not following orders. What are you, the Gestapo? That's the way I see you. You might as well replace that badge with a Nazi symbol. All right, love you all.